I'm going to take a little side tour here because I want to show you the Python debugger and how it works. It is very useful. Now, in this little program that I just built that tells us all the prime numbers between 1 and a number that the user enters, we've got a few things going on. It's not a super complicated program, but let's say I'm getting some weird errors. Like maybe it's not doing what I expected. Okay, so I have the wrong symbol here. Now when I do that, something's going on because I know there's more than that. Yes, sir. It's defined there. It's a parameter. So when the user calls the function, um, it's defined here, and then it's passed in here as part of the function. Yeah. So when I call the function here, it's passing that into it. So that is really where the complexity is here. And something's going on here. I want to find out what it is. So what's the deal here? If I start putting these little breakpoints in, and maybe you've accidentally placed these in your code, or you accidentally clicked over here and you're like, what is the deal with the red dot? What am I doing? So if I put some of these are breakpoints. And what they do is when I debug my code, it actually causes the program to pause at that moment or that line of code. And then I can see what's going on at that moment. When normally, if I just run the program, it's just going to fly right past that. I can now find out what's going on. So let's debug this by clicking the debug. And the other way I can do it is to click that little side menu and choose debug. So if I debug this, okay, so it brings up this pane, which right now looks like the run pane, but you can see it says console and debugger here, console debugger. So this is the console side. And the big difference is it inserts, when it's waiting for me to do something, to insert something, it'll have the right caret and the, or the greater than and the question mark there. So I'll enter 10 because that's the number I'm going to enter to interact with the program. And you can see when I do that, it flips over to the debugger tab. And I know you can't see these numbers very well. So let me take a little screenshot of what I'm seeing here on the variables pane. And let me open that so I can zoom in on it. Okay. So it's telling me what the value and the data type is for all of the variables in my program at that breakpoint. So you can see here, it is at this breakpoint right here. Okay. And so the variables that it has at that point, the first time that code executes, is int num, that's the one that the user entered, and int test is the value of this on the first round of that loop. So it's about ready to run this line of code. So if okay, everything looks as it should be here, I'm going to click this little green button that looks like a fast forward symbol on the debugger, and it's going to go to the next breakpoint. Okay, so here I am at line 3 inside the isItPrime function, and it says 4x in range 2 to int 2. So what I have is I have boo prime, which is 2, int n2, which is an integer, and it's 1 right now because that's what got fed to that when I called the function down below. you can see here, it puts that value right here because it wants you to know what's being inserted into that function. That's not part of your code. That's a little annotation that's there from the debugger that's telling you it's running this function and this is the value that it's putting in there. Super helpful. And here, it's about ready to run this code. Notice that only the variables that exist in this scope are available. We're inside a function, so int number that was entered by the user does not exist here because of the Vegas principle, right? What happens in the function stays in the function. So that we're in the function, so only the variables that are in the function are available here. So I hit the step button again, resume program. I must have clicked that twice or something because it skipped there. And now it's about ready to go through it with int test as 2. So it goes back. And I'm able to track what's going on in the program here. Now, knowing where to put breakpoints is important, but it's basically anytime you want to see a window into what the value is of a variable. The value and the type, right? Because if I'm trying to do math with a string, this will tell me that also. But in terms of figuring out what's going on here, I can start to see what that math is. And instead of this, I should have a double equals sign. So when I execute the code, it's going to be different. But let's keep stepping through because we haven't hit the place where it's doing something really weird yet. So it's 3. And for x in range from 2 to 3. So now I'm in this loop because the range started at 2. Only when it becomes 3 here does it actually do this code. So now it says if int n2, which is 2, which is 3, is not divisible, then prime is false. Obviously, that's not what we want. But then I can see what those values are right here. I got Boolean prime, int n2, and int n x. And it's showing me what's going on over here. And I can click on those, and it'll highlight those variables for me down here. So now I've come back, and int n2 is 4, int x is 2, and now it'll go through that loop, and so on. So you have a feel for the debugger. How should you decide where to put breakpoints? It's a bit of an art form, but like I said, you want to put breakpoints anywhere you want to see the value of a variable. Usually in the lines right before you have an error, that's a good place. If you have an error in a function call or in a function, you might want to put a breakpoint right before you call the function, at the line where you call the function, because then you can see what you're doing before the function. What I would not suggest to you is putting a breakpoint on every line, because then it'll take you 6 years to just run through your program and figure out what's going on. So you want to be strategic. There's a bit of a balance. You want enough to give you information, but not so many that it takes you forever. And I would suggest using the debugger whenever you get stuck on something. And it's something that I would expect for the rest of the class. One last thing about the debugger that I think you should know is breakpoints don't do anything unless you're running the debugger. So in other words, if I run this program, I'm going to fix that because it's bothering me that it's there. If I run this program without the debugger, it just does what it's supposed to do normally. So I can flip back and forth between debugger, changing the code, running the program, debugger, and those three things all work together to help me debug programs. So we'll talk more about the theories and the ideas and the thinking behind debugging and some of the methods as we get into the class more. But this basic tool right now, how I would suggest using it is just throwing some breakpoints in. If you're having trouble figuring out what's going on with your code, put some breakpoints in there, run the debugger, look at the variables, see what's going on. It'll help you because a lot of the time we think a variable is doing something or we think a value of a variable is something and it's actually something else. And so it helps us keep track of what's out there and what we're doing. So that is the debugger. And that is how it works.